I got the 10 best dressed dames, the 10 top teams, the 10 top tunes, and now the 10 most wanted.
Well, don't knock it. That's the American dream. Those boys made the grade.
You were the district attorney around here, weren't you?
Mm-hmm. 10 years.
What's your experience as a defense lawyer?
Not very much.
How do I know you can handle my case?
Well, I guess you don't know. Shall we talk about it?
I suppose so.
Well, now, come on, Lieutenant. Don't be so bored. You know, it might very well be that no lawyer can handle your case. If you mean getting off scot-free.
You seem to be forgetting Barney Quill raped my wife. I have the unwritten law on my side.
The unwritten law is a myth, Lieutenant. There is no such thing as the unwritten law. And anyone who commits a murder on the theory that it does exist has just bought himself room and board in the state penitentiary. Maybe for life.
We open our program tonight with that clip from the film Anatomy of a Murder. I'm sure you recognize the voice of Jimmy Stewart. The other voice belonged to the late, great Ben Gazzara. An interesting take tonight on Take Two, as we have another show called Take Four, where Bob and I will pick 4 movies, but an interesting thread running through tonight's program. And I already mentioned his name. Across the aisle from me, having this film discussion with me tonight, it's the one, the only, the movie maestro, I'll call him tonight. It's Bob Whiteford.
And across the aisle from me, the undeniable, undisputed czar of film on the Central Coast, King Vidor award-winning, your friend, my friend. Of course, I'm talking about the one, the only, gentleman Jim Dee. And Jim, I guess on tonight's Take 4, where each of us pick 4 films and then we talk about them, I've kind of tinkered with it a little bit, because the 4 films I picked all have a common thread. Namely, I've been watching a lot of Ben Gazzara's films lately, and I've been kind of hooked on him. So wanted, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to bring out a couple of his very interesting films.
Oh, I totally agree, Bob. And, just to let our listeners know who well, they may be familiar when we've done this, I believe, 3 times before. Our normal routine is to get together, pick a subject, and try to get as much audio clips as possible to back up our discussion. When we do Take 4, which is 4 usually random movies, we go off on our separate ways and we pick 4 films, come back and do the show. And as you said, the thread running through your films, even though there's a lot of star power in all 4 of them, Ben Gazzara is in all 4. And I got to tell you, Bob, I've always been a big fan of Ben Gazzara, but watching some of the films and some of his work as, in prepping for the show, completely knocked out. I mean, what an amazing actor. We'll touch into that, but I'm hoping our listeners aren't too confused, because we're going to go from some Ben Gazzara films to 4 completely unrelated films. Those are my 4 selections for tonight. So we're going to be bouncing back and forth between different films, but Ben Gazzara kind of a highlight of the 4 that you chose. And we opened up our program tonight with the Otto Preminger film, Anatomy of a Murder, and what a great film. And despite all the star power in this, and I need to let you introduce this film, Ben Gazzara, very young, but holding his own. He's very smart, very tough, and, here he's surrounded by all these great actors in this action, and he's fabulous in this film.
Well, Jimmy, this is kind of interesting. Ben Gazzara was a big star on stage, and he would erupt into the movie world with an adaptation of a play that kind of really made him, The Strange One, which we'll talk about a little later. However, this is his second film, and it's worth noting, here he is, fresh out of the gate, with Jimmy Stewart, one of the biggest stars in the universe, one of the, a very young, also starting out, George C. Scott, as the scenery-chewing district attorney out to prosecute Ben Gazzara for murder. Basically, what's happened is a bar owner, Barney Quill, may or may not have sexually assaulted an Army officer's wife. The Army officer, played by Ben Gazzara, the wife, played by the lovely Lee Remick, also one of her first films. And what happens is that Ben Gazzara seeks vengeance and kills this guy. So then it's a spectacular trial. He gets Jimmy Stewart to defend him, and George C. Scott is prosecuting. And this is one of the better courtroom films ever made. What's interesting about it, Jim, is you have, what's his name, Robert, the fellow from, plays the judge, the guy, You Have No Shame, that fellow, from the Army McCarthy hearings.
Oh.
Yeah, Robert Welsh, is that his name? Anyhow, my mind isn't working too well these days. But he has a nice bit as the judge. What's great about this is there's shades of gray all over the place here. And Ben Gazzara's performance is wonderful because he's a hothead. He's a kind of a virile man of action, definitely capable of killing, and makes no bones about it. And his innocence is almost... It's hard to really tell if he's innocent or not. Even when the film concludes, you're still not really sure if he didn't just commit a murder, and maybe he got off with this one, but he may do it again in future. A very volatile relationship between him and Lee Remick. And Gazzara brings so much to this film. He is just terrific in it. And Jimmy Stewart as the defense attorney, Arthur O'Connell and Eve Arden as the people helping him out are wonderful. Murray Hamilton is in this as well, as is Duke Ellington. This is just a super, super film, one of Otto Preminger's best.
And we're talking about the film Anatomy of a Murder, which is Bob's first selection on Take 4 tonight. And here's another clip with Jimmy Stewart as the lawyer and Ben Gazzara, who he is about to hopefully defend in court. This is from Anatomy of a Murder.
Now, Lieutenant, there are 4 ways I can defend murder. Number 1, it wasn't murder. It was suicide or accidental. Number 2, you didn't do it. Number 3, you were legally justified, like the protection of your home or self-defense. Number 4, the killing was excusable.
Where do I fit into this rosy picture?
I'll tell you where you don't fit. You don't fit in any of the first 3.
Well, why? Why wouldn't I be legally justified in killing the man who raped my wife?
Time element. Now, if you'd caught him in the act, the shooting might have been justified, but you didn't catch him in the act. And you had time to bring in the police. You didn't do that either. You're guilty of murder. Premeditated and with vengeance. That's first-degree murder in any court of law.
Are you telling me to plead guilty?
When I advise you to cop out, you'll know.
Cop out?
Now, that's plead guilty and ask for mercy.
Well, if you're not telling me to cop out, what are you telling me to do?
I'm not telling you to do anything. I just want you to understand the letter of the law.
Go on.
Go on with what?
Whatever it is you're getting at.
You know, you're very bright, Lieutenant. Now, let's see how really bright you can be.
The distinctive voice of Jimmy Stewart and Ben Gazzara, and that's Bob's first pick. The film is Anatomy of a Murder, and you know, Bob, just a comment about Ben Gazzara. I mean, he reminds me of he's always smart. What was interesting in that clip, he says, you know, you're really smart. In all of the stuff I watched prepping for the show, Ben Gazzara always plays a smart guy. He's got fire in the belly. He's an incredible actor. He never seems like he's acting, and perhaps that theatrical training that he had prior to getting into films was quite something. And as we get into the next film, which is after my first pick for tonight, we'll hear from Ben Gazzara himself on getting that first film. But this was his second film, Anatomy of a Murder. Highly recommended.
Absolutely, Jimmy.
Okay, we're playing take 4, and we're going to deviate from Ben Gazzara here with my first pick of 4 unrelated films. I'm not sure when it was, Bob, when we talked about pre-code films. We did a handful of pre-code films, and there's obviously more than a handful. These are the films made in the early 30s before the Hays Code came in, and usually they're very hard-hitting. They hit social issues, and then there's a large amount of these great actors that we see in their very early years. My next film, my first film pick tonight on Take 4 is called Night Nurse, from the early 30s, and we have Barbara Stanwyck on fire. In fact, in that show, I know we talked about Babyface, but we didn't talk about Night Nurse. Now, I'm not even sure how old Barbara Stanwyck is in this film. She's probably in her early 20s, and she is a fireball as almost like a whistleblower nurse that finds corruption in a hospital. And doing a lot of the corruption, or the most corrupt character in the film, is a very young Clark Gable. But I got to say that what is so great about this film is here is the feisty Barbara Stanwyck, who is beyond feisty. She's a whistleblower, she's the most caring nurse you could ever want, and on top of that, she's seeing the corruption that's rampant in this place. Even some of the administrative staff in this hospital are really not doing the right thing. But again, as we've noted on some of these pre-code films, they run about 70, 80 minutes, and they pack so much into a very short amount of time. So my first selection tonight on Take 4, Night Nurse with Barbara Stanwyck and Clark Gable. And here's a fiery exchange between those two stars. This is from Night Nurse.
What are you up to with that kid?
I'm keeping her resting easily until the doctor comes. Have you anything to say about that?
Depends on how you're doing it.
I'm giving her a milk bath.
Dr. Ranger tell you to?
No, I can't find Dr. Ranger. Strange, isn't it?
Nothing's going to be done to that kid without his orders.
All right, then suppose you get Ranger here so we can place the responsibility where it belongs.
I'm responsible when he ain't here.
I'll say you are.
And I want Ranger's orders carried out.
You'll be responsible for a lot more if you don't get wise to yourself.
Yeah?
They use electric chairs for the kind of things you're responsible for.
Just what's the idea behind that crack?
Don't you think I know deliberate malpractice when I see it?
You're speaking right out, ain't you?
Yeah, and I'll make it even plainer. In your case, I'm talking about murder.
Why, you little... Now, keep your bean. If you don't like what Ranger's doing, talk to him. Don't ring me in.
You're in already. Plenty. If this baby dies, you're in with Ranger.
Spell it now. Come on.
How long did you think you could get away with this, you fool? Do you think just because you can strong-arm a couple of women, you have the brains to put over a racket like this? I had your number the minute I stepped into the house. And what's more, I've reported my suspicions on the outside.
Oh, yeah? Spit 'em out.
You want those kids to die.
Yeah?
Because you want what their father left them. That's why you keep the mother all hopped up and full of booze all the time. One of these days, you'll take her out and marry her and grab the children's trust fund. That's what you're after, but you're not going to get away with it.
Who said there was a trust fund?
Wow.
Ooh, that's from Night Nurse. That's Barbara Stanwyck on fire, and Clark Gable, who is he's quite an unsavory character in this. And I should mention that exchange has Barbara Stanwyck probably about a half inch away from, Clark Gable's face, just in his face. She's probably, a foot shorter than he is, but she is just a fireball in this film. And just to make note, if you want to find this film, Turner Classic Movies has released a few volumes. It's called Forbidden Hollywood, and they usually have about 4 or 5 of these pre-code gems on the discs, and that's where you can find Night Nurse in a really nice copy. So my first pick tonight of Take 4 is Night Nurse with Barbara Stanwyck and Clark Gable. Bob?
Gosh, I got to see this film because I just love the way she's letting him have it.
Oh, it's
what
really...
a ton of spirit.
It's really good.
Next film on my Ben Gazzara watch is his first film called The Strange One. It came out in 1957. it's a film adaptation of the play, I believe, of the same name that kind of helped make his name on Broadway. He first hit with this, and then he would do Hatful of Rain, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and then Hollywood, in the form of producer Sam Spiegel, would take notice and bring this really incredible talent to Hollywood. What's interesting about this film, it takes place on a southern military school campus, and like a VMI or something. And you have two characters. One is very, very bad, and he runs the school. The other one is very good, who stands up to him. And it's actually a double debut, Jimmy. It's Ben Gazzara plays the bad student, the strange one, he's cruel, he's cunning, he's manipulative, probably psychopathic, and he kind of runs the show through a reign of terror. And the good cadet is played by none other than George Peppard. This is his first film. They have kind of really an interesting dichotomy going between them. And as we'll hear in a moment from Ben Gazzara himself, many years later, he was offered the role of the good cadet, and he turned it down, saying, no, 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 the good part is the bad guy. And he plays this with such verve, such gusto. And as you said earlier, Jimmy, all his characters are intelligent and they have a fire within. And this is very evident here first time out. His character is bright, cunning, evil, but he has a drive. He sees this as the way to get where he wants to go, and he's not going to let anyone or anything get in his way. It's a terrific debut film. Oddly enough, didn't do very well at the box office, and even people who like movies haven't seen this. For some reason or another, it never turned up on late night television. Very rare, any kind of shows, anything where they're showing older films, it didn't show up there either. And I found this just by accident about 6 months ago, and I was kind of startled. And overjoyed. I'm always happy when I find something that I really didn't know existed, and this was a bit of a discovery for me, and I really enjoyed this picture immensely.
Bob is talking about the film The Strange One, which is the premiere film performance by Ben Gazzara. And right now we're going to hear the voice of Ben Gazzara and the very interesting story of how this film was once a play and became a film. Now, this was recorded in Ben Gazzara's later years, and Bob, you said that he did have throat cancer. So we're talking about a rather elderly Ben Gazzara, but he has sort of a gruffy voice. But here is the story about how the play turned into his first film. This is the voice of Ben Gazzara.
A couple of months go by, and he comes to me and he says, "Hey, Ben, I was at this party, and I met a guy named Calder Willingham, and he gave me this play. And I think this is terrific." He says, "It's called End as a Man. And I'd like you to be in it. Maybe we do it as a project here, and you would play Marquez, who was the hero of the piece."
I'm not trying to act like a hero, sir.
But when I read the play, I said, no. The part here is Jago de Paris. He has all the laughs. Funny, terrible human being. But I thought delicious to play this kind of character. And finally, we performed in front of, boy, I'll never forget that, in front of Lee Strasberg, Elia Kazan, Cheryl Crawford, Tennessee Williams was right there. I could touch him. A lot of very important people, and of course the entire studio. packed, and we knocked them dead. I said, Jack, we can't let this go. We got to take it somewhere. So we got a couple of $1,000 to take it downtown to the Theater de Lis, where we got reviews the like of which you couldn't write them yourself.
That was a magnificent performance.
But Sam Spiegel optioned it. So that, as you know, became my first film. I heard James Dean actually was after my part in the movie.
That is the voice of the great Ben Gazzara talking about how he got his first film role. And Bob, can you imagine you're performing a play and you know in the audience Tennessee Williams is there, Elia Kazan, all these incredible people. And I love the way he describes this because he's so confident. It didn't seem, I mean, he was probably so mesmerized by the audience, and yet he says, hey, we knocked him dead, and then the film went on, or the play went on to become a film, and his first film.
Well, I think he saw his opportunity, Jimmy, grasped it, and went with it, and the rest is history.
There you go. Well, the first film of Ben Gazzara is called The Strange One. That's what we're talking about. We don't have any clips, but we did have Ben talking about how that came to be. We're doing Take 4 tonight on Take 2, where each of us are picking 4 random films. Bob's Have the Thread of Ben Gazzara. My next film, my number 2 film, comes from one of my favorite directors from back in the 60s and 70s who really had a heyday. The director is Nicholas Roeg. He isn't really a household name these days, but I always thought that he at least had a handful of amazing films, unlike any other, and just had a very unique way of not only directing, but he was also a former cinematographer. A couple of the titles, Walkabout, David Bowie, and The Man Who Fell to Earth. The film that I wanted to bring up tonight on Take 4, on Take 2, is called Bad Timing, A Sensual Obsession, and it stars Art Garfunkel, Harvey Keitel, Teresa Russell, and Denholm Elliott. Now, Bob, I was drawn to this film simply because I guess I was thinking of a film that was released recently, late 2010, 2011, called Shame. And here is a film that took on sexual ideas, to a limit. Shame was compared to Last Tango in Paris. And I'm thinking of a category of films that are, big production coming out of a big studio or with big production values, but gets into areas of sexuality and provocative subject matter that we don't normally see on the screen. And I think I was surprised that Shame just sort of got ignored by the Academy Awards. It got ignored by viewers. And despite the fact that this is probably a troubling movie, it's disturbing content in the case of Shame. I mean, we're talking about sexual addiction. Bad Timing, A Sensual Obsession, coming out, I believe, in the late 70s, early 80s. I wish I had a date on it.
I would say 79 or 80.
Yeah, and it gets into a tumultuous relationship with Art Garfunkel and the beautiful Teresa Russell, who also had a relationship with the director Nicholas Roeg. But we get into, not to give anything away from the movie, but something has happened to Teresa Russell. She ends up in the hospital. They have to do a tracheotomy. Something very bad has happened to her. And the first subject, or suspect, shall we say, is a guy she was seeing, Art Garfunkel. She already has a relationship or is married to Denholm Elliott, but this is sort of an extramarital affair she's having with Art Garfunkel. Throughout the movie, we get into some of the very provocative elements sexually, but it's also a detective story, and the detective in the film is played by a very young Harvey Keitel. And much of the movie is Harvey Keitel, questioning Art Garfunkel because obviously, or maybe not obviously, he did something to affect Teresa Russell's predicament, her problem that she has. I mean, she ends up in the hospital, basically. Art Garfunkel is especially good in this film. He plays a pretty unsavory character. He's not very likable in this film. And again, the relationship between Art Garfunkel and Teresa Russell is quite tumultuous, but also very erotic. And the film doesn't pull any punches on that. And I kind of really respect it for the fact that it does go down this rather dark road, gets into subject matter that is kind of unsavory in a way, but really, I was watching this movie today before the show, and I was just kind of drawn into it. It's a detective story. It's a love story. It's a story about perhaps some sexual perversion, but it's really an engaging film. And Nicholas Roeg is also a master of editing techniques where you see things, bounced in, edited in, where it's something that happens later on. He was really a master at very creative editing. So my second film selection tonight on Take 4 is Bad Timing, A Sensual Obsession. Here's a clip. This is Art Garfunkel being questioned by a very inquisitive Harvey Keitel.
This Stefan Wodnik, he's her husband, is he not?
I think so.
Then there's a question in your mind?
He's her husband.
You know him?
We spoke on the phone.
Does Mr. Wodnik... He is aware of the relationship that exists between you and his wife, is he not?
What relationship is that?
You tell me.
I've told him, I've told you already. I'm a friend.
Oh, yes. Forgive me, of course. A friend. And this is why she telephoned you and... But as I understand, you didn't believe her. Because this wasn't the first time she telephoned you threatening to kill herself. Is that a correct assessment of the truth?
That is Harvey Keitel questioning Art Garfunkel in the film Bad Timing, A Sensual Obsession, and really a provocative film. It holds up over time, and again, that the filmmaking expertise of Nicholas Roeg in the director's chair. It's quite a film. If you're ready for something that goes down a darker road, a la Last Tango in Paris or Shame, check out Bad Timing, A Sensual Obsession.
Jimmy, I was just wanting to add with this film, I've always been a big fan of this film, and when it came out 30-some-odd years ago, was pretty much ignored, unjustly, I think, but I think it's also the same problem Shame and Last Tango have, where they, a filmmaker quote-unquote, lets it all hang out, and people, even the studios, no one really knows what to do with it. This is a beautifully shot film. It was shot in Vienna, Austria. And, the visual to this is incredible. And as we were saying off the air, it's like where there's smoke, there's fire. And here, where there's fire, people get burned. And it really is a terrific film. Art Garfunkel is fantastic in this. Teresa Russell has always been good. And, of course, Harvey Keitel and Denholm Elliott have always delivered the goods. This is a film not well known, highly recommended, Bad Timing. I even like this one a lot myself.
And just one thing more to add. I don't blame anyone who doesn't want to go to the movies and just be entertained, have a roller coaster ride, have a good laugh or something. But I'm very grateful that there are films like this that are made that actually explore some human foibles, the human condition in a very provocative way, because it's just as real as something else, or a drama or a comedy. So that's my second film, Bad Timing, A Sensual Obsession. We're doing Take 4 tonight on Take 2, the movie program. We have a lot more to talk about. We're going to take a break. Back in a moment. You're listening to Take 2 on public radio for the entire Central Coast of California. KCBX and KCBX HD1, San Luis Obispo. KSBX, Santa Barbara. KNBX, San Ardo. Streaming worldwide at kcbx.org, where you can also find the Take 2 program archives. If you'd like to write to the program, the address is movies@kcbx.org. Take 2 is also featured at npr.org. Support for KCBX comes from Mission Community Bank, where you can deposit checks directly from your business anytime, day or night, with Mission Remote Deposit. A scanner on your desktop makes remote deposits a snap. More at missioncommunitybank.com. We're back on Take Two. My name is Jim Dee, and I'm here with my very good friend Bob Whiteford, and we're playing Take Four, where we just kind of pick four random movies that don't necessarily have any connection to each other, or in tonight's show, there is a connection. But on this program, Bob and I like to talk about movies, and sometimes there are just particular single movies out there we'd like to bring to your attention. And we've each done two. We're halfway through, and we're going to continue now with Bob's next selection.
Well, my next selection is from 1963, a film that I wanted to see for many, many years, and now through the Warner Archive, I could. It's a film called Convicts 4, and it stars Ben Gazzara as John Repko, a gentleman who, man who kills a storekeeper in a fit of rage when he's impoverished during the Depression, and goes to jail first to be electrocuted, and then he's reprieved, and then he gets a life term in prison. What happens to him behind bars is kind of an interesting story. Somehow this film got lost in the wake of Burt Lancaster's Birdman of Alcatraz. What happens with John Repko is he's an artist. He learns how to be an artist under the tutelage of a reform-minded prison official played by Stuart Whitman, who's very good in this. Some of the fellow convicts are played by the likes of Sammy Davis Jr., baby, absolutely at the top of his game. Ray Walston, my favorite Martian, as a psychopath. Timothy Carey, of course, who would show up in many John Cassavetes film, as would Ben Gazzara, is featured. Rod Steiger as a sadistic prison guard is very memorable in this. Vincent Price playing the art critic who notices the talent of Ben Gazzara's character, and ultimately through his art and through the reform and rehabilitation movement started by Stuart Whitman's character, leads to his release. What's interesting about this film, Jimmy, this is back in the day when they made movies about rehabilitation. This was part of the rehabilitation as opposed to punishment view of incarcerating people. And this was actually based on a true story. And Ben Gazzara is terrific in this. There's a scene early in the film when he's on death row, and he's being prepared to go to the electric chair. And the banter he has with the guards, he seems defiant, because he's no angel. He's a pretty tough guy, and he gets pretty hardened behind bars. And how ultimately it's the situation as he's waiting to be executed, how it's not only affecting him, but the guards as well. He has some interesting encounters with Stuart Whitman and a really terrific character actor named Adam Williams, who was in a bunch of stuff, From Here to Eternity. He was one of the tough guys in that as well. And how it's just when he gets the reprieve, they're all relieved. Nobody wants to see this happen. It's just horrific for all of them. It's also worth mentioning Broderick Crawford as a really sadistic warden all about. I mean, this film is just loaded with great performances. Ben Gazzara being the glue that holds this film together. If you dig films from the early 60s, what they used to call message pictures, like Birdman from Alcatraz, Pressure Point with Bobby Darin and Sidney Poitier, films of that ilk, I think Convicts 4 will definitely get you there.
You know, Bob, I was watching this and I just was amazed by it, even though, well, we're going to play a clip and it may not be indicative of the more of the rehab part of this film, just because, well, the clip we're going to play has Ben Gazzara and Ray Walston sort of plotting an escape, but that isn't really the crux of this movie. But as you said, I as going through this film, I'm seeing Broderick Crawford, and then when Rod Steiger shows up as that guard, I was absolutely amazed, and he's in his typical scary self. I would not want to be in a prison, period, but I wouldn't want to be in a prison with Rod Steiger as the guard.
I mean, he'd overact us to death, probably.
We're talking about the film Convicts 4, and here is a clip. This is Ben Gazzara and Ray Walston.
I'm making a break, Iggy.
Yeah? What do you got in mind?
You interested?
When?
Three months, maybe more.
3 months? What do you want me to do? Collect socks or something?
I'll tell you in plenty of time.
You'll tell me now. What I gotta know is, does it make sense? I mean, I got a lot to lose if it don't work.
Will you stand still for a minute? I'm digging a tunnel.
From here?
No, from my cell. I lock alone on the flat since I got out of solitary. But when the tunnel's big enough, you go in. You go in the hole, and you dig. From there to there.
That'll take a lot of digging, man.
Sure. But in 3 months, the schools will have called off all the patrols.
Yeah. And until that time, while they're roodling all over the countryside, I'll be right there in the tunnel.
Ben Gazzara, Ray Walston from the great film Convicts 4, and again, perhaps misleading, Bob, do you think, with that clip, just because, you know, you may hear that and think of The Great Escape or something like that, and that's not really the crux of this movie. It's more about rehabilitation and Ben Gazzara being the artist, recognized as such, and so it's a really interesting film. I found, what is the year of Convicts 4?
1963.
Okay, so I was thinking this was a little bit more your prison escape movie or something like that, and perhaps our listeners would get that impression from the clip, but it isn't that at all. And Ben Gazzara, as you said, and this incredible cast of stars in this movie, it's worth seeking out. And, you know, you did mention about the Warner archive, and again, we should mention that to our listeners, and the fact that you won't find these films in catalogs. You've got to go directly to either Warner's, and I think some of the other studios have this ability to get single movies, and they press you a copy at your request.
You know what's interesting, Jimmy, on that note, because I know we've had folks ask about this down the years quite a bit. I was just on the Warner Archive website today, and they have also the Sony or the Columbia films. They have the access to the Columbia Vault, and as of today, they now have the MGM Vault classics, including films like the one we love, The Offense. So if you go to the Warner Archive website, I think it's warnerarchive.com, suddenly you're going to have access not only to a bunch of great old RKO Radio Pictures, Warner Brothers. Now you got Columbia and MGM and United Artists films that all fell through the cracks, and Convicts 4 was one of them. great find.
That's really great information because a lot of times we get hit up like, where can you find this film? I mean, listener wants to know where to get an obscure film, and it almost sounds like one-stop shopping at Warner Archive with all the studios and their films. So check that out if you're looking for some films, and that's a very interesting way of getting movies where they'll just burn you your own copy and order it through with the Warner Archive. Well, we're playing Take 4, and my number 3 recommendation for a film is probably the one and only film directed by the infamous David Lynch that didn't have some disturbing element or that rumbling undercurrent that he usually has in his films. And this is the wonderful film called The Straight Story, which was based on a true story of about a guy who goes to visit his brother, and he can't really drive. He's elderly, so he goes on his little tractor lawnmower, and the top speed is about 2 miles an hour. I always found this to be first of all, David Lynch making a film for Disney. Now that in and of itself sounds like it's something out of you'd see in a Fellini movie or something. Some obscure surrealistic sort of thing, that how could these two get together. But The Straight Story is a charming, wonderful film. Richard Farnsworth, who we've seen as the Gray Fox and as a number of wonderful character performances, just really shines in this film. We do know that Richard Farnsworth was not long for this world after the film. He had cancer. Apparently he was in a lot of pain and discomfort making this film, but he totally envelops this character who says, I'm going to go visit my brother. He had a stroke, haven't seen him in years, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. And he doesn't have a car, so the way he goes is on this little tractor lawnmower and he's pulling this thing behind him that he can camp on the way. If you haven't seen this story, folks, don't let the name David Lynch turn you away, because if you've seen Blue Velvet or Wild at Heart or some of his other more provocative films, it is nothing like The Straight Story. In fact, the term The Straight Story, the word straight, is the Richard Farnsworth character is named Alvin Straight, and that is The Straight Story. Just a little bit of the charm of Richard Farnsworth comes through on this clip. This is my third pick tonight on Take 4, and here's a clip from The Straight Story.
Well, tell you right now, Alvin, you won't be going anywhere tonight. Aside from your drive belt being busted, you got transmission problems. Where are you headed, Alvin?
Mount Zion.
Mount Zion, Wisconsin, past Prairie du Chien?
That's 60 more miles of hills.
That's across the Mississippi. What's in Mount Zion, Alvin?
My brother lives there.
Why didn't you just take your car?
I don't have a driver's license.
Well, couldn't he come visit you?
He's had a bad stroke.
Where are you coming from?
Back a piece.
West Union?
Hawkeye?
Nope.
Well, not New Hampton. You haven't come that far.
You've come a long ways, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. Lawrence, Iowa.
Lorenz?
That's west of the grotto. How long have you been on the road?
What's the date?
October 8th.
5 weeks. I left Lawrence on the 5th of September.
You've been bunking in that?
That's my rolling home.
Where you been setting up camp?
In the fields. I pull off. I don't travel at night.
Haven't you been scared being alone? I mean, there's a lot of weird people everywhere now.
Well, ma'am, I fought in the trenches in World War II. Why should I be scared of an Iowa cornfield?
The wonderful Richard Farnsworth. I believe this was his last film, Bob, and he was such a wonderful actor. And, again, attaching a heartwarming, wonderful story to David Lynch, it kind of broadens his ability to put across just this very warm-hearted, almost down-home story. It's the ultimate road movie, except it's a road movie where the guy traveling goes 2 miles an hour, and essentially the film is people that Richard Farnsworth, like in the clip, runs into, and just conversations over the nighttime campfire. It's really a great film, and this film I don't think has been released on Blu-ray, and of course seeing it at a movie theater is kind of not an option. But if this film does come out on Blu-ray, I'd really like to revisit it one more time, just because the cinematography is spectacular. And here's this guy on his little tractor lawnmower going past fields of grain and these beautiful vistas, along with meeting up with a lot of wonderful people along the way. So I highly recommend David Lynch's The Straight Story.
A wonderful film. I think you had it at the Palm, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, and it was great on the big screen.
I saw it there, and I loved it. I mean, the whole time I'm kicking myself going, this can't be a David Lynch film.
That's kind of the beauty of it, I think.
It is. It really is. I mean, you can't help watching this in its beautiful, warm, like homespun Americana majesty and thinking, gosh, the same guy did Inland Empire. I mean, or Mulholland Falls. Drive. I always get those mixed up. It's like, holy cow.
Well, Bob, your next movie with Ben Gazzara,
Peter Falk, and John Cassavetes, the classic Cassavetes film Husbands from 1968.
Wow.
And we had talked about this film when we did the tribute to Peter Falk. These three guys were close friends in real, REAL life, and got together and did, what might have been one of the first big independent films. This was produced and released through Columbia Pictures, but basically Cassavetes financed this himself with money he made as an actor in films like The Dirty Dozen and Rosemary's Baby. And this film really, wow. I mean, it's an incredible movie. I can't say necessarily it's a great film. It's great filmmaking in the sense that this is a totally improvised film. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes, and it deals with three friends' reaction when another friend dies suddenly, and they're forced to confront their own mortality. So what they do is they kind of run away from their actual lives, their jobs, their wives, their families. Back in the time when, that stuff would not, I mean, not to say it wouldn't now, but I think, the social structure was a little more rigid back then, though it was starting to change. And maybe it's films like Husbands that changed it. So they bolt. They leave New York, they head to London, and they just wail. They just go out and party, and they party hard because it's what they have to do. It goes without saying that there are some scenes here that are utterly amazing. The spontaneity and the charisma of Ben Gazzara and Peter Falk and John Cassavetes playing off each other. I mean, and they're just kind of going along. It's like you really get a glimpse of who they really were. A little, warts and all. And that's what I find so fascinating about this film. And see, as a film lover, I love that because now they're all reunited in cinematic heaven. But in the day, movie people are, I mean, you would never, what's the chances of ever getting to meet them, let alone hang out with them and let your hair down with them or have them let their hair down with you. And this film is that. It's like you really get to see these guys up close, personal, really kind of the way they really were, kind of like Brando in Last Tango in Paris. This film is kind of like that, but and Bad Timing, but not quite to that extreme. It's almost like it was a link in the chain. It just came a few years before. Husbands is fascinating. Ben Gazzara, incredible. He's often said this in Saint Jack, the film he did with Peter Bogdanovich, which I just saw recently. In fact, I saw it yesterday. Fantastic. I mean, these are his favorite films. Killing of a Chinese Bookie with Timothy Carey, directed by John Cassavetes, his 3 favorite films. So I just wanted to leave my Ben Gazzara fix with a little bit of Husbands.
You know, Bob, too, I was watching Husbands, and I think one of my loves for this movie is the fact that Cassavetes films were kind of messy. They're almost they're very non-Hollywood, and the fact that these guys are all like having their midlife crises, and they act like, teenagers at some point because they're such close friends, and then they're very defiant, and let's leave our wives and our lives behind and go to London. But you think of these guys swinging and doing a new life for themselves, or breaking out of this very stodgy mold they get into, but it isn't comfortable. They get to London and they end up with some women, and you think, oh yeah, they're having a good time, but no, it's not fun, and it's kind of unsavory, and they are just the improvisation is amazing, and just the fact that it's kind of frayed at the edges. I can't.
Yeah, I mean, they're not getting what they think they want out of this. They do all this, and then they come. It's like they're opened up to like other things that really frighten and upset them, and it just turns the whole thing from a happy joyride into a really dark self-examination.
Yes.
I mean, it's just, the film is a tidal wave of emotions.
Here's a clip from Husbands, and this is Ben Gazzara, who has had a very tumultuous argument, which includes some physicality, with his wife and his wife's mother, who is living with him. I think that's another reason why he's bolting. And here's a conversation with the character that Ben Gazzara plays, along with his mother-in-law. This is from Husbands.
Where is she? Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I'll talk to her tonight. Tell her I love her.
All right, Harry. I'll tell her.
I love you, too.
You're a bad boy.
I am not a bad boy. You understand me. If she wasn't your daughter, you'd be on my side.
I'm not allowed to say anything.
All right, then don't say anything. Who the hell asked you to say anything? Don't say anything.
I didn't say anything.
Then don't. I know what side you're on. Just say goodbye for me.
From the film Husbands, and boy, that is a tumultuous film, but it's filmmaking unlike any other. It's just raw. I think it's trying to capture a real European feel, and Cassavetes really excelled at this very interesting improvisational and rough at the edges filmmaking. That was from Husbands. Well, my final pick tonight on Take 4 is a film that Stanley Tucci made after one of my favorite films, Big Night, and this kind of got lost in the shuffle. In fact, some people are going to probably kick me for for recommending The Imposters, which I think is just a hoot. I connected with this film, which doesn't make any bones about being very silly. It's an homage to maybe Woody Allen. In fact, Woody Allen has a small role in this film. But it's Stanley Tucci and the wonderful Oliver Platt who play these guys who want to be actors. They also do this little routine that kind of deceives people where they like to kill each other or do a death scene in front of people, and it usually gets them some benefits because they're so good at it. But we're talking about an homage to Woody Allen, to the Marx Brothers. They end up on a ship, and there's Tony Shalhoub, there's Campbell Scott, Lily Taylor, a wonderful cast. And this is just silliness on parade, and it looks like all the people in The Imposters are having the time of their lives. Here's a clip from The Imposters. This is Oliver Platt and Stanley Tucci. Their conversation is interrupted by what they did previously, which is do their little death scene, but the conversation has to be the fact that Oliver Platt dies, but Stanley Tucci, it was his turn to die. Here's a conversation between Oliver Platt and Stanley Tucci from the very funny Imposters.
I'm sorry. You stole my death. I couldn't believe it. I thought, why is he dying? I died. Today is my day to die. I was really confused. Did you think that you were supposed to die?
I was confused. I was unsure, and I made a choice.
I'm hit! But didn't you see that I was dying?
I did. I did, but... I did,
But what?
Arthur, it was just because the pause was just so long. And good. It was such a good long pause that I was just unsure. I became unsure.
Well, it felt good.
Oh, no, it was good.
Really?
Oh, you were good.
Really?
Oh, very.
Well, then, Maurice,
Really,
I don't
really.
understand. What?
Because it was so good, I became unsure.
he became unsure on who was to die in that little play they have. Oliver Platt, Stanley Tucci in the very silly and very funny The Imposters. And that's one of my 4 on Take 4 tonight. The Imposters, David Lynch's The Straight Story, Nicholas Roeg's Bad Timing, A Sensual Obsession, and going back to the early 30s with Barbara Stanwyck and Clark Gable in Night Nurse. Bob?
And my 4 were kind of a mini retrospective on Ben Gazzara, Anatomy of a Murder, The Strange One, Convicts 4 with Sammy Davis Jr., baby, and Husbands.
Well, there you have it, another edition of Take 4. Hopefully we've made some good film recommendations for you, and we want to thank you for listening. Bob?
We'll catch you next time on an edition of Take 2.
Morena,